You're listening to The South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans for Ohio State fans on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, and SoundCloud. Fucking miserable.
Did you get drunk during the game or after the game or both? Or?
No, just during. I was drinking. Actually, I had some pretty good beer selections there. I was drinking Stella's the whole game. I don't drink beer that much anymore.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was just brutal. I mean, I saw, from my perspective, that end zone. I was sitting at basically at the 30-yard line. So the end zone where the game, ending interception happened was in our end zone. They were driving toward that end zone, and I could see that Olave had cut off his route, and I could see that that the ball was going right to a Clemson defensive back. And I picked up my jacket and started up the stairs, I think, before he even brought the ball in for the interception, and just ran out the fucking stadium. And mercifully, I was able to get a cab right away because the game's in Glendale, right? It's not actually in Phoenix. I was staying in Phoenix, so, I had a long cab ride. And, there was just a mad rush of Ohio State fans out of the stadium. And mercifully, I grabbed a cab right away and just jumped in. And, man, it was tough. That whole, from the Wade ejection forward, it just went from just glee and giddiness to dark. And just, woe is us and doom. The mood in the stands, at least around me, there was just there was a dude sitting right next to me, this older guy who just kept getting drunker and drunker, and he was getting darker and darker. And this kid who was sitting in front of me with his dad, just, again, the negativity. Oh, my God. It was like, a couple times it's like, guys, we're still winning this game. All right, come on. Yeah. Keep your chins up.
Yeah.
But yeah, it had just gotten really, really dark after the Wade ejection. And, let's face it. I mean, he's a really, 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 really important player on that defense. And you only know that if you're an Ohio State fan, right? Because he's a glue guy. And, I mean, you even saw the middle of the field exploited by Clemson later in the game. And
I would actually say he's even bigger than a glue guy because, as we saw in the Michigan game, I mean, that if he's in that game, those guys don't get nearly as much. The receivers get as much traction as they did. So,
I mean, you would think he would have been a factor on the two screenplays that went for touchdowns to Etienne, right? Because that was right in the middle of the field where he patrols the middle of the field. One would think he might have been in position to make a play. I mean, that's, that's a huge guess on my part, but you could see the middle of the field being exploited after his ejection.
Yeah, and also there's just a huge drop-off in talent and experience from him to the next player who replaces him.
Yeah,
and that's not like you're going from someone who is not a little, not as good, but still really good. It's like a drop off.
Huge. So it's a huge drop off. I mean, and actually, when he got ejected, they went right at Amir Reep on that drive, and he got called for a pass interference. I mean, Amir Reep is a good, solid Big Ten corner, but he's not a future first-round draft pick, 5-star, talent that Wade is.
Not yet,
No, not yet. I mean, I think he's like a junior now. I think he's, he'll be a serviceable starting corner, I think, at Ohio State. But I mean, I think it's a huge drop-off to
Canadian Football League from there.
Yeah. I mean, to guys like Reep and Seven Banks, you're going from, Okudah and Wade, who I believe were the top two corners in their class. If I'm not mistaken, certainly like top 2 or 3. We know that Okudah was the number 1 cornerback in the country in his class, and I think Wade was somewhere in the top 3 or 4.
This is a sick thought, but I literally hope how poorly Okudah did on that last series is enough of a push to make him come back for another year because he was shameful I mean, they all were on the defense on that last series, but but particularly was really bad.
Well, who blew the coverage on their slot receiver? I didn't see that, but there was the big gainer, the 38-yard pass reception to one of their slot guys, right? It wasn't one of their lead.
Yeah, he missed I think that was the one where Bakuda missed the tackle.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but, I mean, at the end of the day, you knew, those guys are good players. They're going to make some plays, and I think the narrative that we were nobody thought that we would shut them down. And sometimes guys make plays and guys.
Yeah.
But consecutively, but consecutively.
Yeah, that was rough. I mean,
I know. I mean, and there's no excuse for it, and there's definitely no excuse for it in that particular moment of the game. I mean, I felt pretty damn good.
Yeah, I mean, it was. Yeah, no, I mean that's true. I mean, on the other hand, Ross 6 catches for 47 yards, Higgins 4 catches for 33 yards. I mean, you show me that stat line without knowing the score. I mean, I'm saying we win that game, right? I mean, they
well, and what did what's his bucket run for? I think it was under 50 yards, and he killed us on a couple screen passes.
Yeah,
Lawrence is the one that killed us on
Etienne final 36 yards on 10 carries. Right. Obviously the adjustment by Clemson, and they were doing it early. Clemson was. They were running Lawrence early and often in that game. I think they knew that it was going to be tough sledding for Etienne against that Ohio State front seven. They knew that. And they went to Lawrence early and often as a runner in that game, and he made us pay 107 yards rushing, but he got 67 of that on one play.
If you'd have taken those 3 stats, right, Ross, Higgins, and Etienne, and what they produced in that game, and you tell me we lose this game, you're like, well, then we must have had 4 or 5 turnovers, or something just went horrifically wrong.
Yeah.
Which, in essence, did.
Right, and you give us on our stats, what was like over 500 yards offense.
Mm-hmm.
You would be like, wow, we must have at least put up 40 points.
516 yards of total offense and only 23 points to show for it. And I texted you guys in the moment while this was going on that I felt that was going to doom them if you settle for field goals. Right? Ohio State had 3 first half trips in the red zone. First and goal at the Clemson 5, first and goal from the Clemson 8, first and 10 from the Clemson 11, and they had to settle for field goals on all 3 of those trips. That is going to doom you in a game like this against that type of opponent. And it did. I mean, it was part of their undoing. It wasn't the whole story, but part of that, their undoing was the fact that they settled for field goals on those red zone trips.
Yeah. Well, and you don't know, my buddy Brad, who's here, he said the same thing. He's like, this is not winning football. And I agree with that. But up to that point, I responded, I said, I've seen nothing that tells me that we are not the better team here. Like, even that being said, right, and it did, it's part of, this 8-piece puzzle that ultimately doomed them. But so many other things had to go wrong. Mm-hmm. Even with them not putting up the points where they should have put up those points. I can't imagine how we gave that game away. And part of Ohio State's got to own it as much as, you can lay some blame on the officiating. I think you can clearly lay some blame on Day, some of those play calls, especially that punt. They're trying to block that punt.
Mm-hmm.
But we were, as we all sort of suspected, the superior team out there, and we just let it slip through our fingers, which just makes it so painful.
I'm torn on that point. I don't know, Matt. What do you think? Do you think Ohio State was the better team and they let it slip away, or?
I think if you're the better team, if you're a championship team, you don't make some of the mistakes that they were making.
I agree with that.
Yes, if both teams playing equally as like a mistake-free football, and both teams getting a fair shake, and both teams, going back and forth, both offensively and defensively, making great defensive stops, making great offensive plays, I would think we would win. But unfortunately, that's not how sports run most of the time. It's, it's most of the time it's someone taking advantage of someone else's miscues. And that's what happened. I mean, like Paige said, we didn't do anything to help our case.
Yeah.
There's some boneheaded penalties that we really didn't make most of the year.
Yeah.
And some of the play calling got, I think when they had the recipe for keeping Venerable's game plan on their heels, and when they went away from it, I'm just like, what are you guys doing? And they kind of went back to it in the fourth quarter where they got that much needed touchdown. But honest to God, with that team against the way that they were rolling the first half, I would, if you had said, they're looking great now, but they'll only score one touchdown in the second half, I'd be like, well, you got no freaking way.
Yeah.
So it's a head scratcher because we talked about all year about how well Day and the defense adjusted, like everything adjusted. And I think that there was parts where I was just like, they are acting like a deer in the headlights with what Clemson is throwing at them. And it was very concerning. But when it was time, all we had to do was stop them at the end of the game. It was simple as that. Stop them. They weren't on the 40-yard line. They were inside. What was it, like the 10 or something?
Yeah.
And they went right down the field.
Four plays.
We could have stopped that and game over, done. So at the end of the day, there was a lot of stuff that went against us, but we had it completely in our card, not only with the stop, the defensively, and going down and scoring. We could have, it still could have been our win. So, you tip your hat to Clemson. You're very frustrated as a fan because this is not the type of team that you watch most of the year, but that's the way sports shake out sometimes.
Mm-hmm. I wrote this to you guys yesterday. I think I did over text kind of late toward the end of the night. And the margin between Ohio State and Clemson is razor thin, but there is a margin, and it was on display last night. Clemson capitalized on every Ohio State mistake. Matt, you just made that point, that in games like these, it's capitalizing on the opponent's mistakes. That can be a huge factor, and clearly that was yesterday. Clemson capitalized on every Ohio State mistake, and they did not commit any major mistakes of their own. That's why they've won 2 of the last 3 titles. Ohio State is not quite on their level just yet. That's my big takeaway. They are closer than they've been since they won the title in 2014, but they're not quite back to that level yet. And I know Ohio State fans don't want to hear that, but 3 postseason losses to Clemson in 6 seasons, 2 in the playoffs. The proof is in the pudding. We're just not at their level just yet, although I will say I think we took several steps closer to that level this season. And kind of just going back, looking through it, what could have been for Ohio State. We mentioned the 3 first-half trips into the red zone that they could not convert into touchdowns. You commit an idiotic roughing the kicker penalty on a Clemson punt that gave the Tigers a fresh set of downs that ultimately allowed Clemson to take the lead. That happened in the third quarter. Ohio State was -2 in the turnover department. They were -30 in penalty yardage. The defense, as good as it played at times yesterday, did allow second-half scoring drives of 99 and 94 yards. That's just not championship football. It's not. You can't be negative in the turnover department and negative in penalty yardage and then allow scoring drives at 99 and 94 yards in a game of this magnitude. It's just not. And then to kind of...
but dude...
Go ahead, Paige.
I understand that, but, I mean... I don't know why you don't think we're not at their level. I mean, think of all the things that had to go wrong. And I'm not taking anything away from Clemson. They did capitalize on our mistakes, and they did not make any. And a lot of times, teams press because they're outmanned, and you see that when we play Michigan, right?
Yeah.
But to think that this team isn't on that level, I think if you play this game 10 times, we win 7 out of 10. I mean,
I think there's a razor-thin margin. I'm not saying they're not on their level. There is a razor-thin margin between the 2 programs.
Right.
And we saw it. We saw it last night.
And here's the bigger point about it. You know why they do have a bigger thing? Because they have a quarterback who's been in bigger games, who's played championship games, and who almost seemed like he was licking his lips hoping that he would get one more shot at it, and he got down there and he delivered. The dude didn't look like he was nervous one bit going down the field.
He was great.
And that's something that is incalculable to winning a championship. You got to have someone who is like that. And that makes the difference sometimes. And that's why I would say we don't have that.
I agree.
Let me ask you one question, though. One question. If Wade does not get thrown out for that targeting penalty, do you think Ohio State wins the game?
If they would have made the right call on the interception, if Dobbins
everything else, just say everything else happens. Okay. Wade does not get thrown out of that game. And that also implicitly means that Clemson punts the ball there.
Down 16-0
and we get the ball. Yeah. Do you think Ohio State wins that game?
Probably. There was a lot of football left to be played at that stage, but yeah.
There's too much football to play at that stage. Would that have an impact? Yes. Would it be enough? I don't know.
I think we were the way better team. I don't think that you could make the argument that Clemson is a superior team or program than us. It's not what I saw in that game. And clearly you guys disagree, and I know I'm ifs and buts, but seriously, they weren't the better team.
Here's what I would say where they have the edge. If you like objectively said, what do you think is better? They have experience, and that's huge because they didn't look like they were nervous at all. We were the ones that kind of didn't stop the defense on the last series. I mean, granted, Clemson their defense didn't look super tough either. We were going down the field, and they got kind of lucky with Olave taking a left instead of a right. I think it's still a push. Like if we played, like to your thing, if we played 10 times, I don't know. I think I could safely say we'd win 5 of them, but I don't know if we'd win 7, maybe. But
yeah, I mean, each team had a possession inside of 3 minutes to score the go-ahead touchdown. Clemson drove 94 yards in 4 plays to convert their opportunity, and Ohio State threw a pick in the end zone because of a mental mistake by our best receiver. That's the margin right now, in my opinion. Right. And it happened more than once throughout the game where Ohio State made mental mistakes or made mistakes that you just can't have. And Clemson didn't do that. And that's the margin. It's razor thin. I don't know how many times Ohio State wins if they play out of 10. I think it's close to 50-50. But I can't. I'm sorry. I can't. We've lost 3 games to Clemson in the last 6 years, 2 of them in the playoffs. I can't make a case that Ohio State's the better program right now. I'm sorry. I can't.
You know what another thing is, too, is like, we have to talk about the elephant in the room. There, and you kind of have about Wade, but you know what? Those are huge officiating calls that you should never on any kind of championship or playoff level game be talking about the officiating in any sort of manner. And we're talking about it not in just one play, but a couple plays that they were just horrendous. And
but how's that our fault? That's not our fault.
I'm not saying it's our fault. What I'm saying is, that's like I'm leading back your way, Paige. But it's like the point is that that we have that thing. Like I can't talk about this in kind of a meaningful way because I think truly those things shade the conversation a little more darkly than it should. I can't. You know what I mean? Like I can't say that Clemson's a better team, and I can't say that Ohio State's a better team because those two freaking poor ass calls really shade the game, and not in a fair way, in a way that takes away from someone. Like I know it sounds like Ohio State's crying about it. It's not the only reason we lost. It is a reason that really took some of the game away from us in a manner that's not as divorced from what sports is about, and that you have a replay booth that overturns unilaterally, which is horseshit because they shouldn't be involved in the game unless someone taps them on the shoulder. And then the other one was, there's no way that they, to overturn that, you have to have 100% clear evidence. And there's no evidence of that guy juggling the ball. So it's two things that were
tough calls, tough breaks.
Yeah.
Just tough breaks. Paige, go ahead.
And those And those in and of themselves are enough to tip the balance in a game like that, because they are close. And I'm not saying, hey, we're the way better team, or maybe but what I saw, what I watched, that on that field, Ohio State was the better football team, and they didn't win. And they didn't win because they made terrible mistakes. I believe in certain instances, Day kind of got panicked, and there might have been some coaching jitters going on there. They, you can maybe overcome one, questionable officiating call. You're not going to overcome two or three.
Seismic
and then the
ones.
other thing, seismic ones. And then the other thing that I would say, okay, Clemson's experience, one of the things we railed on for weeks is that they didn't play anybody, and we were the battle-tested team.
Yeah.
And so either are they experienced or are they not? And
no, well, I think
and granted,
they came out. They came. That's why I think we came out. I think I was actually said it during our pre-game thing, is like, I bet we're going to go out to a hard lead because they're not used to this level of competition. But they got enough talent to where they, and especially their coaching staff, to where they should have been able to just, and they did. And all those things, and the fact that we did not put up 21 points in the first quarter, all those things, we still had a great chance to win that game. All the things that, that sort of went against us, that either they were self-inflicted or not, and we still could have stopped them on defense, or we had the ball on 3rd and 2 on the 23-yard line and still had an opportunity to win that game. That tells me that we should have won that game. We let it slip through our fingers. That's all I'm saying. Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I mean, I understand that perspective. I totally do, and I can't argue much with that perspective. I guess in games like these, there are going to be a certain number of calls that don't go your way that you have to be able to overcome. Especially the way this targeting penalty is officiated now. You can it's almost a guarantee you're going to have one of those a game. Maybe that's too high of a percentage, but it's likely there's going to be a call like that. You're going to have things that don't go your way. You have to overcome it. And I thought Ohio State was too slow to adjust to the loss of Wade. To me, it felt like there was a psychological effect that just, maybe it was just me in the stands and it was me in my own head, but it certainly had an effect over the crowd. I mean, they booed every Clemson play, it seemed, after that for like an hour. It just took them so long to shake off that bad break. And that's another marking of a championship team is, you get a bad break, you lose a guy, okay, next man up, shake it off, let's go, you're still winning the damn game. And Paige, you said that the halftime interview with Day, which I didn't see because I was in the stands, but you said that you could hear it in his voice that even he was having a hard time shaking it off. And,
he was. He
and
totally
that was disappointing to hear because next man up, let's move on. I was so fucking annoyed with so many of the fans that just wouldn't let it fucking go. I'm like, we were still winning the game. And it was a bad break, but you got to move forward, onward and upward.
Right.
And they did actually bounce back from the fumble return for a touchdown that was overturned by Fuller. They bounced back from that. They got the stop. And they ended up scoring the go-ahead touchdown at a possession or two later. So, hey, look, you're winning the game. You're up 2 with about 3 minutes to play. And so then that leads to my next question. Actually, Matt, you probably have something you have to say before we go on to this next question. Go ahead.
No, but to piggyback on that, like I saw something, there was another play on an interference, and I saw Day, wave his hand in disgust at the officiating. I'm just like, dude, you're losing your head. Get your composure together. Like, you can have an assistant coach do that, but the head coach should never be outwardly saying, "Oh, forget you guys," and making those kind of gestures. You need to get it together now. Yeah. I think it was in the third quarter. It's like, God, you can't, and you could see it in the play calling, to what you guys both alluded to, some of the panicky type play calling, and it came onto the field.
The punt block to me seemed I remember feeling that. Well, first of all, okay, you're struggling, right? J.K. Dobbins was hurt. I believe the punt block that was in the third quarter, and Dobbins, I think he left the field at the end of the second quarter. He got hurt. I can't remember the sequence of things because I know he had to go to the locker room at some point in the third quarter. But clearly, the Ohio State offense was hampered by the fact that Dobbins was hurt. And Fields obviously was limited going into the game as a runner, and you could see it start to have an effect on the offense in the third quarter. Day was trying to get something going with that punt block call because Ohio State had stagnated offensively. I personally wouldn't have called that play because you're still winning the game at that stage, but I understand why he did it. He's aggressive. I guess you have to be aggressive in games like these. I totally appreciate that. But you also have to be able to trust your players that if it's not there, you don't run, you don't plow into the kicker. And, it was just tough. It was tough. And it did seem a little desperate to me, to your point, Matt, that it seemed like had Day to do it over again, maybe he plays that situation a little differently. You're getting the ball back. Go ahead, Paige.
And the other part about that drove me crazy is that if you do block it, there's a better than 50% chance that it's just going out of the back of the end zone for a safety. Yeah. It's the wrong position in the field to go after it. You're going to get the ball back at the 50-yard line. Yeah. And again, his aggressiveness, he had it all year. And, you're going to have to live and die with some of this stuff. But that, to me, was a panic move. Yeah. But the positioning in the field just made it. That's why it made no sense to me. Why? I mean, the risk reward doesn't make sense in that particular moment.
Yeah, and you didn't see Clemson doing that. I don't remember a desperate move by Clemson. They just patiently waited for their opportunities and took advantage when they came along. They didn't panic. I mean, they're down 16-0 in that game. They're down. Ohio State on that second to last possession, they took over with over 9 minutes to play in the game, and Ohio State methodically went down the field and burned 6 minutes off the clock. Clemson didn't panic. They didn't do anything stupid. They didn't get a roughing the passing penalty. They didn't get caught in a blitz and get burned for a touchdown. They just laid back. They got the stop. They forced the punt, and then they relied on Trevor Lawrence to march down the field, which he did with total ease to take the lead back. So I just felt like that a desperate move like that is by an inexperienced coach. Again, that goes back to the thin margin between Clemson and Ohio State. That's what I saw. That's the slight difference. They're in the same arena. There's no question about it. They're in the same category as programs. Clemson's just that much better, just a sliver better. And that's one of the reasons why. I want to ask you guys the question. So it's 4th down and 4. There's 3 minutes and 7 seconds to play. You're at the Clemson 39-yard line. Do you go for it there instead of punting? Now, they decided to punt. They pinned Clemson down at their own 6-yard line. Most coaches would probably take that situation, right, with a defense as good as Ohio State's. Was that the right decision? Matt, what do you think?
I mean, in hindsight, this could be a real easy decision.
Yeah.
We go for it. But you know what? I think at the time I was like, I wasn't happy to see Chrisman out there. I'm sure Gallagher was, but I wasn't very happy to see Chrisman out there. But I was like, I understood it. And there's part of me that was like, okay, we used our ballsy move on that 4th down that led to the touchdown to Olave. So I was like, okay, I get this. He's kind of counterbalancing it with some conservative Tressel-like move. And I'm like, so I wasn't bad with it. I just don't – that's kind of like – again, I don't really think there's a bad – either call would have been good. I don't – at the time, I just remember being like, This seems like a smart move, although we did seem like we had a nice little momentum going. But
well, I mean, Paige, what do you think?
Yeah, 4th and 4, I thought punting the ball was the right move, and Sloan to your point, when Olave caught that touchdown, that was a fourth down play. That was 4th and 1, and you're throwing the ball 20 yards over the middle of the field, for a touchdown.
Oh my God.
That was
ballsy.
Insanely gutsy. So I was in the moment. I was totally okay with it. A 4th and 2. I think you're going for it there. 4th and 4. Sure.
That's tough.
And so the other kind of question I had, and I don't want to take you off track, Zach, to your question, but Venables was blitzing, and when he was blitzing, like I was like, oh, he brought 14 guys, right? I mean, he was blitzing everybody. It just seemed to me that I would have expected a bigger game from our receivers. Like, should they? I just couldn't understand why guys weren't getting wide open, or Fields just didn't have enough time because. And maybe credit goes to their DBs, and they're better than I thought they were. But that was one of the things that was sort of head scratching to me throughout at least the midway through the second quarter into the end of the game.
Before we move on to that, I have a comment on that. Let's just close the loop on the 4th down question. I agree with you guys. I think that was the right call. It was the right call because you've got Chase Young. You've got this defense that's in the top 2 or 3 in every, single defensive category. We were just being critical of Ryan Day's desperate move to, block that punt. Well, if he goes for it on 4th and 4 there and doesn't get it, we would call that a desperate move and a bad move on his part. I think that was the right move. And in the end, Ohio State got the ball back and had every opportunity to score the game-winning touchdown. And they couldn't. So I think it was the right call for them to punt there. With the receivers, I think Clemson does have good corners. They have very good corners. I thought the receivers you had a great play by Garrett Wilson earlier in the game to set up the field goal. The catch by Olave, there was an unbelievable catch by Mack along the sidelines. I thought KJ Hill played really well. He had a play that went for a first down where he caught the ball. I think it was like a 12-yard conversion they needed to make. 3rd and 14. And I thought they, that didn't stand out to me as a failure by Ohio State. I thought that was just good against good. Right. And we made some plays and we just didn't make enough of them. I mean, we were over 300 yards in the passing game. 320 yards passing. He had 66 receptions from Hill, 6 by Mack, 6 by Dobbins, 4 by Wilson, 3 by Olave, including a touchdown. I thought they were solid, and honestly, I thought they were better than the Clemson receivers. I think for the game, I thought we were more productive and better. I don't know if Matt, what'd you think?
I mean. I thought that I think like on both sides of the ball, we were fairly evenly matched. I mean, our defensive line was making some gains. Their defensive line definitely was having pressures. I think that was one of the if I'm taking myself out of the Buckeye fan standpoint, was one of the fairly enjoyable things because you could see where their defensive line was getting pressure. Our defensive line was getting pressure. Mm-hmm. Their corners were covering well. Ours were covering well. The linebacker play on both sides looked solid, not stellar. Mm-hmm. I thought there would have been a bigger game by Olave of all people. Mm-hmm. I was kind of surprised that he didn't. I mean, of course, if you'd went right instead of left at the end, we would be talking to about like he would be the greatest Buckeye receiver of all time. But it's such a hard game to reflect upon because. The potential of the only person that I think delivered on what I thought it actually went over what I thought they could do was Dobbins. I mean, Dobbins on a bum ankle was like running, catching, blocking, and my respect for him has gone like I didn't think it could go any higher for him, but
yeah.
I was telling these guys on the thread, I'm still haunted by that last play because Dobbins was like open, like in the flat, 5 yards out, and if he would have hit him, I'm sure he would have got at least to the 10-yard line, if not further. And there's a looking back quality of like we should have just rode JK into the end zone and that would have been a nice storybook ending to the game. But what are you going to do?
Yeah. Yeah. I thought there were you put up 516 yards of total offense. You should expect to win. They were very productive, both running and throwing. It was just
you can't put up 560 yards of total offense against Clemson and only put up 23 points on the board. That's why you lose the game.
100%.
Right?
100%,
I mean,
yeah. They didn't convert on those red zone opportunities in the first half, and then they had the pick at the end of the game. Just a bitter pill to swallow. I mean, there's just no. This is going to be one of these games when the replay comes up on ESPN Classic. I'm changing the channel.
Oh.
I'm just not going to. I can't even bring myself to watch any of the
no
video, the replays. It's just a bitter pill.
Yeah, the sooner we could play Clemson again, the better. Just to wash this out of my head, man. That's going to be the torture waiting for the next time we get to play these fucks.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I want to see them anytime soon. I wouldn't be disappointed if we had a different opponent in the playoffs after these last two. I mean, getting blown out the last time and then losing in just absolute heartbreaking fashion this time after really having outplayed them for, the better part of the game. So, I think where do we go from here? I mean, I think offensively. We'll be very, very good next year. We'll be elite. I think you've got Fields coming back. We already know that much of the Ohio State starting defensive line or offensive line will also be back. We've already heard from most of those guys that they will return. You're going to have Olave back with Wilson. You're going to sprinkle in some of these elite receivers coming in with the freshman class. I'm blanking on their names. Who's the lead guy coming into our this year's recruiting
Fleming
class?
Or something like that.
Julian Fleming and guys like G. Scott.
You're right, G. Scott.
Yeah, so the only issue I think is at running back. You did see a massive drop-off. All due respect to Master Teague, and of course, kids can really develop and improve from one season to the next, which I think Teague has the talent to do. But I expect Dobbins will enter the NFL draft. A player at his position, you just can't afford to give another year away to college football. He has to go.
There's nothing left for him to do.
So there's going to be a drop off at running back, but I think overall they're going to be an excellent offense. I expect them to be as good as just about any offense in the country. They will take a step back defensively, I would expect, especially in the secondary, but. Again, hey, maybe Sevyn Banks and, some of these young defensive backs, Josh Proctor, who had some nice moments last night, but also had some moments where you could see where he needs to develop.
Right. You know what? And more importantly, and I know no one's going to want to hear this, and I'm going to probably go wash, gargle after I say it, but, there's no better teacher than failure.
Yeah.
And, we all remember the story of do you remember the story of the Virginia basketball team coming in number 1 and then losing to the 16th ranked seed?
That's right.
And then the next year, what did they do? They won the championship. And it's something that you sometimes on a path to the championship, you need to have these heartbreaks to be instructive. And I think more so than to Coach Day than anyone else.
Yeah.
I mean, he probably is the one who's going to grow from this more than anyone. I'm in second place, probably Fields. I mean, Fields and Teague to that degree too. I mean, Teague didn't do well, but he saw from Dobbins what you have to do in a game like that, and I'm sure he's going to be working his ass off to make sure he can follow in his footsteps, which will be very hard to do.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I mean, I think. You pull back the lens and you look at what Ohio State achieved this year, especially relative to the previous 3 seasons. There was no Iowa loss. There was no Purdue loss. They finished off every team they played. They won every game by double digits. They left no doubt about their playoff fate. was just a matter of seeding. This program is back to playoff contention each and every single year, in my opinion. They underachieved for 3 straight seasons, 15 through 18. And I think they took several positive steps forward, and I think are now back in the conversation with the Clemsons and the Alabamas. I think there is no doubt about that. Now, Day has got some guys on his staff he needs to replace, namely Hafley. I think that's a big key to next year. Ryan Day said in his press conference after Hafley left for the BC job that he was going to go out and find the best coach in America to replace him. And he said that over and over and over again, best coach in America. I think where things started to go off the rails a little bit for Urban Meyer, and we've talked about it before on this pod, I don't want to go all the way back there. However, he got a little lazy when it came to replacing, the Tom Hermans, guys like that. He relied on coaching buddies and stuff who really weren't the best available candidates for some of these jobs, and that's where things started to slip a little bit for the program. So I think that's a key for Day. I think he's going to go out and make the right choice. But overall, a very positive step forward for the program. I think there's no denying that, and they're headed in a really positive direction, bringing a ton of elite players back for next year. I think the playoffs is a totally realistic goal. And, we've seen this before in Ohio State where you lose a bunch of players on one side of the ball or the other, and we're all thinking to ourselves, well, how are they going to replace these guys? And somehow they do, right? Doug Lesmarie made this point on his podcast earlier today. He said, back in 2005, I didn't think they'd be able to replace A.J. Hawk and Bobby Carpenter, and then then all of a sudden James Laurinaitis appears, and they come back, and that team in 2005 that we thought was so good and could have played for a national title, they come back and go undefeated and get back to the national championship game. So that's on the table for this program.
Point.
So, Paige, what do you think? What's your overall feel on where the program is and the direction?
I agree with everything you said, Sloaner. That's a great analogy with Virginia. It's going to be tough on defense, and they're going to, you can't expect the same productivity on that side of the ball. But it's not. I don't expect them to take any, dramatic steps back to like 75th or anything like that. One thing though that does kind of concern me is that, you go back and you look at the last 9 recruiting classes. Clemson has done this by not really, playing in the upper echelons of, a top 5 class over and over and over again.
Yeah.
They have seen this, they turned the tides on that this year with the number 1 class. But then I was thinking about it, what overcomes that? What allowed them to do that? Well, Jesus Christ, they had Deshaun Watson and they got Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah.
Right. And just an elite level quarterback can make up for so many other deficiencies on a football team. And so will Ohio State be able to reload? Yeah, absolutely. And Justin Fields, having him back for another year is critical. The other thing we didn't talk about is I don't think he was anywhere close to 100%.
Yeah.
He wasn't anywhere close to 80%.
Mm-hmm.
Having him healthy, there's no reason why this team should not be contending for a playoff spot next year. None whatsoever, because he is such an elite player. And, I give, sort of going full circle here, I do give Clemson credit, where they kind of said, hey, we're going to make that guy beat us. And he damn came close to doing it. They were bringing the house consistently at him, and he didn't quite make enough plays, and that's the way it goes. But he's special, and he's going to be the key to that team next year, making another run to the playoffs.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. They're elite at the most important position on the field. And to your point about how Clemson's been able to overcome, deficiencies, is by having the best player on the field at the most important position. And Ohio State's going to have a guy like that, and some other damn good players too. I thought it was really cool to see Zack Harrison start the game at defensive end. By the way, did Tyreek Smith play last night? I don't remember seeing him.
I remember seeing him, but I don't know how. He didn't seem like he was in there a lot, or
Yeah, because Zack Harrison started the game at the other defensive end position opposite Chase Young. Tyler Friday played a lot. Being at the game, you can't keep track of things like that, and you kind of rely on the telecast to keep you informed about guys who are out. I don't remember seeing Tyreek Smith in the game, but he's obviously going to be the type of player that will factor in big next year on that defensive line. They'll get Jonathan Cooper back. They'll need his leadership and the depth there. They'll be very good on the defensive line. They should be good, solid at linebacker. We'll see. That back seven is going to be the question. How they fill in all the positions, all the guys that are leaving for the NFL or graduating will be key. It'll be interesting to see how those position battles develop. And that'll be key for whether or not Ohio State makes a serious title run next year, I think.
Yeah, unfortunately, those guys were, again, Browning played a pretty good game. Harrison didn't have his best game. But it's up to the linebackers for the RPO, in stopping the quarterback on those runs. And Clemson saw it, right? They saw it, Wisconsin do it to us, and they saw Michigan do it to us.
Yeah.
And they exploited it. And it was... And we took everything else away from them offensively, and it still wasn't enough. And, they kind of exposed us there. And again, good coaching on behalf of Clemson. They found a weakness and they exploited the hell out of it.
Yeah, they found a way to get ATN involved, right, in the passing game, right? Nothing was happening running the football, right? Ohio State did a really good job of limiting him as a runner. But three receptions for 98 yards and 2 touchdowns, just killer. Those 2 touchdowns were killer. And, that's the part of the field where elite linebacker play makes a difference. They were they were middle screens right over the middle of the field. And, they definitely exploited, as you pointed out, Paige, the soft spot of our defense, the weakness of our defense.
Speaking of sides of the field and softness, did that field look like there was a monster truck show that went that morning or something? Like, what the fuck? People were slipping and grass divots were everywhere, and I'm like, what the hell is going on with that field?
That was I heard that was a brand new field. I think they brought in it was natural grass, and they brought that in just for the game. But yeah, there was definitely some footing issues, and both teams exploited that, right? Yeah. But
but I saw a few things where, guys were like, look, and again, it affects both teams, but that turf is horrible. And yeah, it sounds great. Oh, we just brought in new turf, and I know that I guess they remove it out of the stadium and then they can bring it back in.
That's right.
Typically,
you roll it out. Yeah.
It takes time for those things to get, I guess, solidified, but whatever. Jesus, we can't complain about the frickin' turf. There's enough other things.
I was just like, come on.
I know. No, you're right.
Playoff game. Like, come on, let's get this thing a little bit in order.
It was interesting. Simmons for Clemson had the interception, but both Simmons and Chase Young didn't have a huge impact on this game. Chase Young, 2 tackles. Yeah. He did not register a sack, no tackles for loss. Simmons did have the pick, credit to him for that, but only 4 tackles. Did not get into the backfield for a sack or a tackle for loss. Both teams seemed to do a pretty good job neutralizing the other team's best defensive player. These semifinals have been duds for the most part, total duds. And actually, Ohio State has probably played the 2 best semifinals in the playoff era. The semifinal against Alabama back in 2014, and then this one. But yeah, hell of a game. Great year for Ohio State. As we've said, several steps forward. There's reason to be optimistic, very optimistic about next year. You look at, Paige, you mentioned recruiting. Look at how Ohio State recruited relative to the rest of the Big Ten. My God. If you're made, I think it was Ari Wasserman of The Athletic who pointed out after that early signing period, and they showed the recruiting rankings, and he said, it's because the rest of the Big Ten cannot compete with Ohio State today. They're not going to be able to compete with them on the field, next year, and so there's really good reason to think Ohio State can come out of the Big Ten again next year. They've got a great non-conference matchup in Eugene against Oregon next season. With Justin Fields. You got to love that matchup. You got to love our chances, even in a tough place to play, to go in and win that. They get Michigan at home next year. So reason to be hugely optimistic about getting back to the playoff next year.
Well, I mean, with Harbaugh as coach, every game against Michigan is a game at home.
Guys, do you have anything else you want to share before we go drown our sorrows for the rest of the day?
Yeah, I don't know.
Was this cathartic for anybody? I think that was the whole point of this. I think it was.
I feel a little better. I feel a little better for sure, having talked about it. Now, I could probably use a little hair of the dog.
Yeah, I canceled my Hulu Live TV this morning, so that felt good. That means I don't have anything else to do with any fucking sports for a while.
Hey, the Ohio State men's basketball team's number 2 in the country, so maybe there's some consolation there. We can watch them on an NCAA tournament run, hopefully come March. But yeah, I mean, there's no sugarcoating this one, guys. This one's going to sting for a while.
Yeah. Well, I think you could make the argument this is the worst one ever. I mean, the 95-96 Michigan losses were brutal, but this is there, and this could be, at least in our lifetimes, the worst one ever. I mean, it's like, okay, we were young, you're young, you take these so badly. I haven't taken a loss like this badly.
Let me ask you something. What would sting more? If they would have drove the length of the field and winning on a touchdown and game over, or how it happened last night?
Yeah, I mean, so you're saying if Clemson would have scored on the last play of the game over, or the way that it played out last night?
Yes.
To me, it sounds kind of like they're in the same ballpark. They're both.
Well, I think actually us going down the field and getting closer, and I'm like, oh, we're gonna win this. We're gonna win this. And then
I see what you're saying.
And then it turned. Yeah. I think that was much harder than we're winning, and then Clemson goes down and scores with no time remaining.
Yeah. They both sound pretty awful.
Yeah, just a masochist. Question from a masochist.
Okay. Well, what would be worse? I mean, the 2006 national championship game drubbing at the hands of Florida, where we were just never really in the game, or the way we lost yesterday. I mean, I think. At least you come away from this game. It hurts, but you come away from this game saying, "Hey, we belonged. We belonged in the conversation here. We're close." You tweak a few things next year. I mean, after that loss to Florida, but that whole season, it was like, talk about a bubble burst. The whole fucking season was a mirage. It was an illusion.
But there's some definitiveness into that. Like, we're not that good.
Yeah.
Whereas this loss, you're like, we could have won that. Yeah. And I think that for me stings a lot more. Like you finding out you're not as good as you are. There was no gray after that Florida game. We were just like, they're a way better team.
I think this, now that I'm thinking this through, I think I'd rather have this situation. I'd rather this situation because I'm coming out of this saying, okay, we know what we need to do to get better. We've got the personnel coming back. We know we belong in the conversation with the defending national champions. We proved that. And now we know what we make tweaks here and there. We make personnel changes here and there. We could be right back in this situation again next year. After that Florida loss, it was like, where do we go from here? Well, that dream season, it was a bubble burst. It was like waking up from a dream turned into a nightmare. I mean, it was.
That's a more enlightened view of it for sure. But I'm talking like once it hits 4 zeros.
Oh yeah.
Like what's that feeling? Like the first one, it's like you've had some chance to kind of look at it and say, oh well, here's the cup half full version. I'm talking from a fan. You're watching this game for 3 fucking hours, and then 4 zeros.
4.
Oh yeah.
And 4, yeah. And then you're driving down the field, and you miss it, and you miss the chance to win the game. Like,
yeah,
this one for me is by far something, because I thought this team would manhandle LSU. I thought we were going to have a hard time against Clemson, and then to feel like we had the game in our grasp, and then the end on that interception was just like, that stung. Like, I don't think I went to sleep until like 1:30.
Before you joined the call, Matt, I was telling Paige that, so I could see that Olave had cut off his route, and I could see the ball was going directly to the Clemson defensive back. And I grabbed my jacket and started heading up the stairs, literally. I mean, before the kid had even brought the ball in. And I sprinted up the stairs and ran direct. I got, like, mercifully, because, the game is being played in Glendale, which is about 12, 13 miles from Phoenix, which is where I'm staying. So, the streets were about to be flooded with people, and I was like, oh, my God, it's probably going to take me 3 hours to get a cab home. Mercifully, there was a cab waiting there. And I jumped.
I thought you were going to say you grabbed your jacket and you like Forrest Gumped it all the way back to San Francisco. You ran as hard as you could all the way from Phoenix to San Francisco.
It felt like that. No, I mean, so to your point, the hollow feeling I felt, the emptiness I felt in that moment, you're right, it doesn't get worse than that. Whereas if you're getting your ass handed to you, as we were against Florida, you had 2.5, 3 hours to kind of accept your fate. But now at this stage, looking backwards, I would prefer to have what happened last night, and looking forward to Ohio State's future. Hey, man, we belong in the discussion with the defending national champions, with the Alabamas, with the LSUs. We can play with these teams. We know that, and we've got enough talent coming back where we can be in this conversation again next year. So now I feel better. Whereas, boy, after that 2006 game, I was like, man, we are not that good, and we've got a long way to go. And I thought 3 hours before we were going to win this game, by double digits. So, yeah, but no, I mean, this is in the pantheon of some of the worst losses, Ohio State losses of my lifetime, for sure. Paige, to your point, it's going to sting for a while. So here's another thing I was thinking while we were in the stands. The Clemson is just landing haymakers, and we are just hanging on by a thread. And as a fan, I was hanging on by a thread. The fans in the stands around me were coming unraveled. And I was thinking to myself, if we eke this one out, then we get LSU in the Superdome. Like, if you're a Clemson fan right now, you're like, yeah, we won. And you're like, we hang on by a thread. And that a lot of these fans are like, man, we dodged a bullet. And now you got to turn around and go to Louisiana, to New Orleans, and play basically as a visiting team in that game against that LSU team. Oh, my God.
Well, I was at the 2006 game and had a similar experience to you, although Monkey and I just left the fucking stadium midway through the third quarter and like, we're not going to witness this anymore. Yeah. We just went and started drinking Budweisers in the parking lot. In the moment, this was so much more worse because you had to live and die through every single minute down to the final 4 zeros. But who knows? It would be hard to get off the mat of this one had we eked it out to go down to Louisiana, but we'll never know. It's not going to happen. So no point in really worrying about that anymore.
Any kind of initial thoughts on that matchup, Clemson LSU? I think LSU is a 6-point favorite.
Yeah, I mean, Oklahoma's not really a good team to, especially in terms of defense, to really gauge like how good LSU's offense is. Which is, obviously they're very good, but
very good.
The Big 12 is not really known for their defensive stoutness. So, the thing is that. The Trevor Lawrence, I think he's gonna be the X factor in this game. I think that they're stronger on the defensive side of the ball by far. It'll be interesting to see how much playing the Superdome really favors LSU. I'm sure it will, but I think that they're also coming in a lot more cocksure than they probably should be. Like, Burrow said, there's not a defense that can contain us. Hey, thanks for putting that on the billboard for us. So it'll be interesting. It'll be an interesting game. So, but I know it's a little bit of Buckeye pride coming in, but I'm favoring Clemson in
in the championship game.
Paige, what do you think? You got any thoughts on that matchup?
My first thought is, can I even muster the will to watch another college football game this year? Only time will tell. 2 weeks to
or a couple hours
over this.
A couple hours,
yeah, or a couple hours, or 6 Heinekens, one or the other, and get me back on track. I everything in my gut tells me LSU, but
yeah.
I think Clemson does a really good job of taking away what you like to do, and somehow, some way, they will slow down Burrow and just get them out of their comfort zone. And I've seen enough from Trevor Lawrence to not put my money on that guy. I'd take Clemson.
Yeah, boy, Joe Burrow's a gamer, man. My initial gut says LSU because of where the game is played. That's not the number one reason, but I mean, Burrow has just been a surgeon as a quarterback, and that offense is loaded. And if this Ohio State offense with a gimpy Justin Fields and a gimpy J.K. Dobbins and receivers who are very, very good, but not at the level of LSU's receivers. I mean, they have the Biletnikoff winner. Gives up 516 yards to Ohio State. I mean, what's the yardage total going to look like against LSU, who has a better offense? I'm sorry. I love Ohio State's offense, but LSU's is more potent, and in my opinion. I like LSU in that game, and I wouldn't be surprised if they win by more than 6. But I wouldn't be surprised if Clemson shows that grit and toughness and ekes it out as well. But my money would be on LSU. Yeah. All right, fellas. Hey, listen, it's been a great effort. Thanks for showing up. I know we're all bummed today, but I appreciate you guys playing hurt. I got a flight to catch. I got to get off to the airport. So we'll
travels, my man.
All right, guys. We'll find a reason to do another pod here soon. Buddy. All right. Thanks, boys.
Okay.